that becomes the key focus of any civilization that attains level 1. So what that means is that if you're dealing with an interstellar civilization, which is what we're doing in contact with close encounters of the fifth kind, by definition, they've gone beyond the speed of light. The body of light that you're doing that with is very, very similar to what an interstellar vehicle or even an experimental man-made one shifts into. Any interstellar civilization, their number one science, after they've attained a level 1 civilization, where they have peace on their planet, where they have 0 point and free energy, etc., and are not damaging the biosphere, the number one science for thousands of years becomes the science of consciousness. This is an absolute fact. Once our civilization begins to behave in a civilized way, which we aren't now, and we stop murdering each other and having wars and destroying the biosphere using 1800s fossil fuel systems and all of that, we'll then be liberated to focus, instead of on trying to money grub and eke out an existence, we'll be able to focus on these deeper aspects of what I call genuine spiritual development and the experience of higher states of consciousness. And that becomes the key focus of any civilization that attains level 1, which is a peaceful world that's in harmony with its environment, not destroying it, but is very high tech. A level 1 civilization and higher, all of them have as their chief science and their main focus the development of higher states of consciousness. And as a result, their technologies correlate exactly with that. So what that means is that if you're dealing with an interstellar civilization, which is what we're doing in contact with close encounters of the fifth kind, by definition, they've gone beyond the speed of light. And when they've gone beyond the speed of light, what I call the crossing point of light, like the sound barrier, you're in a whole nother dimension. It's a whole different law of physics that are operating. And the core of that are increasingly conscious dimensions: thought, visualization, astral, celestial, all kinds of aspects of energy that are beyond the 3D material that we're also hung up on. The reality is most of the cosmos is resonating or phasing beyond the speed of light. And this is beginning to be recognized by physicists in the post-quantum era. And the reason it's very interesting, it's like full circle. If you look at the ancient teachings of native peoples, the ancient, even the Gnostic Christians, you look at the ancient Vedas, the Sanskrit ancient teachings from hundreds, thousands of years ago. We don't know how old the Vedas are in Sanskrit. It predates any organized religion, including Hinduism or Buddhism, by the way. And those bodies of knowledge were all centered in the science of consciousness. So what I think is that a field of consciousness and that study is something that is not only ancient, but very futuristic, ironically. And that's where we're headed. Now, civilizations that are going past the speed of light, if they don't understand the science of consciousness, they can't do it. They can't contact each other, they can't communicate to their home planet, etc. And why is that? Well, we're using this system right now. We're on YouTube, and we have phones that are operating on radio frequencies, which are from 1844, Marconi and Marconi's Hill and the telegraph. Those are all propagating in a waveform at 186,000 miles per second, which is the speed of light. So every second it's traveling 186,000 miles, which sounds fast, but it isn't. It's just too damn slow to go interstellar. So when you're going interstellar, let's talk about our nearby star systems in our own galaxy. Say 1% of the way across the Milky Way is, since it's 100,000 light years across, it's enormous. In other words, a beam of light would take 100,000 years to traverse just our own galaxy which is one of billions or trillions of galaxies, each with 100 billion star systems or more. So when you look at that, let's look at 1% of the way across the Milky Way. That's 1,000 light years. 1,000 light years at the speed of how you and I are communicating right now. It take 1,000 years to say hello, and another 1,000 years to get an answer back. How are you doing? That just took the time since the birth of Christ. So it is not possible that we're being visited by civilizations that are locked into 3D material, linear, speed of matter, speed of light. And that's why we have to, even if we're just emerging as a civilization, we have it within our traditions, but also within our own conscious experience, the ability to deeply understand that the consciousness field is an unbounded field. It's not bound by space or time. And that thought emanating and moving in that field, if you can expand your awareness and see with your mind a distant place or distant time, you can connect seamlessly to it. That's how these interstellar civilizations understand reality and are actually not just philosophically understanding it, but their operating system, let's say it, their OS. Their operating system is in the transdimensional, beyond the speed of light, fields of energy, thought, consciousness, conscious forms, etc. Therefore, if we want to make contact, we can't expect them to be using, this thing, a piece of junk that is using radio frequencies from the 1800s. I mean, with all our vaulted smartphones and computers, it's all locked in an 1800s paradigm of linear speed of light communication. Never mind our travel. Our travel systems are jets and cars that are really from the 1800s and early 1900s, burning fuels to putter along at 600 miles an hour on a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. It's just completely ludicrous, because we have technologies that are way beyond that, and that's another discussion. But the point is, when you see an interstellar vehicle and it's come from another star system, even if it's in our nearby cluster of stars in our own galaxy, they are not going at the speed of light. They're going at multiples of the speed of light. And when you transcend the speed of light, the craft and everyone on board are resonantly shifted into these other dimensions. I'll tell you a little secret that a lot of people don't know. You ever heard of Dreamland? Not the studio that Steven Spielberg has, Dreamland SKG. Dreamland is a name of an area at the Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada range. The pop culture calls it Area 51, but nobody calls it that, by the way. Only people who don't know what's there call it Area 51. Nevertheless, Dreamland, the way that got its name is that when they were experimenting with reverse engineered ET craft and those technology with a man-made system, the people who were using it were kind of teleported and moved resonantly, where their bodies and the craft shifted into what is very similar to the lucid dream state. Let me repeat that. If you have a dream where you're flying over the ocean or over the forest or your city, the body of light that you're doing that with is very, very similar to what an interstellar vehicle or even an experimental man-made one shifts into when they're using high voltage systems that are resonating in a way that all the electrons and all the matter of that spacecraft and people's bodies are resonantly shifted in terms of frequency to this beyond the speed of light aspect. And it isn't like you speed up to the speed of light. You're there in a 3D, and then you're there in another dimension. It's absolutely instantaneously. And that explains, if you look at the movie Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, you'll see objects that appear, vanish, and then reappear way over here, or almost at the same time. There's no linearity to how they have to move, like a jetliner. Why is that? Because they're using technologies that enable them to transcend linear space-time. But as they do so, not only are their technologies more wedded to this field of conscious energy, but their communication systems are all resonating in frequencies beyond the speed of light. They're moving at the speed of thought. Now, what is the speed of thought? Well, it actually is instantaneously. And this is why when we had Dr. Targ on, who had worked for 20 some years for the CIA doing remote viewing through Stanford Research International, he called it SRI, which is what people call it, but I want to define that for you. It's SRI, it's Stanford Research International. He talked about the fact that the physics of this has been well understood for decades, that in fact, the field of consciousness and thought isn't limited by space or time. And this has been proven in elegant physics, science experiments. So, for example, where they would take what we mentioned, random number generators, put someone in a room and put their thought awareness on it, and it starts shifting, that this random generator of zeros and ones shifts to the ones. Or you could put your consciousness in a container of water, even at a great distance, and it will create, as Dr. Emoto showed, these beautiful crystals and forms if you're putting your attention in love and hope, or these ugly kind of tormented looking shapes if it's hate or something negative. So thought and consciousness instantaneously can affect systems, engineering systems, at any distance, regardless of how far away, because they are not operating in a linear 3D way. They transcended that linear 3D cosmos. So we have to do that. If you want to be an ambassador to these other civilizations, it's sort of like ET 101 isn't what you've been taught through the UFO subculture. ET 101, the course on extraterrestrial sciences, is the science of consciousness, period. Luckily, this is something that we all have an understanding of just from our day-to-day experience. An enormous percentage of the population, I was talking to Dr. Targ about this on a private call not long ago, have had what are called lucid dreams of the future. How many of you guys have had that? I bet virtually everyone. I met my wife in a lucid precognitive dream. If you read the book Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge, which is sort of roughly autobiographical that I wrote some years ago, maybe 20 years ago or 18, I can't remember. That was one of the stories in there is how I was in the Middle East. I had this lucid dream 5 days in a row. I was 22 years old. I was no more interested in being married than the man in the moon at that point. But I had this dream where this enlightened being introduced me to this woman who I'd never seen on this plane. And I was told very specific information. This is who you should marry. She'll be older than you, but it won't matter. She'll come from far away and leave, but you'll get back together. And there was all kinds of detail, sort of in a packet of knowledge. And I woke up and I was with a friend. I said, I keep having this dream. About a month later, maybe 2, I can't remember. This person, my wife, Emily, walks through these gardens up in Israel where I was living, in Haifa, and it was her. Now, of course, you don't go up to a complete stranger and say, hey, I've had dreams with you, babe, I'm going to marry you now. I mean, it's just crazy. But I eventually did tell her that story after about a year of correspondence. Maybe not a year, a little less. And back then there was no internet. This is 1978, before most of you were born, I presume. But what I decided was, I have to tell her what really happened, because we had this instantaneous bond, like we had known each other forever, even though we knew each other only for about an hour during that meeting in Israel before she went back to the Caribbean, where she was a Peace Corps worker. And I thought to myself, I need to tell her how this really happened. Of course, luckily, she was a very spiritually minded, conscious person who did meditation. So she said, oh yeah, I understand that. So I tell people that all of us have had, that's sort of like a pretty dramatic version of a precognitive lucid dream, but we've all had them. But how does that happen? Think about it. How is it that you go into a state of consciousness and you fall asleep, And during the dream time, what the Aboriginals in Australia call dream time, you have a lucid, crystal clear, full color dream. And whatever that is in that dream happens the next day or the next week or the next month or 10 years later. This is a very common experience. Well, it's sort of like a thing that is experienced by almost every human at some point in their life. That's a sort of a signpost that says, you're not only what you think you are, locked in the frame of your physical form and in this time and place. You're actually connected in consciousness to every point in space and every point in time. And that includes right now, but going back, but going also forward, which is remote viewing into the future, what used to be called a seer. Now, this is something that has been unfortunately sort of relegated to mysticism, and a lot of thinking is that, well, you've got to be somebody living in a cave, meditating for 50 years by yourself to experience this. This is absolutely a harmful myth that I think ecclesiastical and spiritual leaders, and unfortunately a lot of my scientific brethren, have propagated. That is a damnable lie. You do not have to be in some kind of esoteric, ascetic setting to have that experience or to develop them. And so that is something that we have to begin to sort of move beyond this monkey on our shoulders going, oh, I'm just a little dumb thing and I'm just stuck right here on Earth. And it's just, you're telling yourself that lie over and over again. And that it becomes its own destiny. Because if you have a different understanding of who and what you are, that is that you are a conscious being capable of connecting to the field of consciousness that's beyond space and time. You can see any place, you can see any point in time, you can remote view where these interstellar civilizations are, you can connect then to their communication systems, which are not only their innate capabilities like we have telepathically, but also they have devices that would look like a box or a device that seamlessly is interacting with conscious thought. So you, in other words, you want to turn your computer on, you think to it, and it turns on. Of course, Elon Musk has a company called Neuralink, and by 2025, he wants to have a system so that he would have a system where we would be able to do that with our own computers. Here's a memo to Elon, if you're listening. Classified projects have that already and have had it since the 50s, probably around 1956. Nevertheless, just using our own innate ability, because I don't have one of those devices. It was offered to me, and I turned it down because I knew it would put me at greater risk than I need to be. Because I also realized that I don't really need to have it. Why? Because the hardware and the software, let's call it, that you need to be an ambassador of these civilizations, remote view, connect to them in consciousness, is your birthright. Every single human being, by virtue of being conscious, can be conscious of just consciousness and become aware of that field of awareness that has no limitations in space or time. And by doing that regularly in meditative states, you then can advance to where you begin to operate at that level, not only in the meditative state or in a dream, but while you're driving down a road. You're just sort of like, oh, where's the highway patrol? Or whatever. And actually, people know me well know I do that kind of strange stuff. But the point I'm making is that you need to understand that this is your innate capability as a higher intelligent life form. Not just humans, dolphins, and even other animals have that capacity to a point. But once you reach, let's say, a critical mass of intelligence and consciousness, you can understand this, go into meditative states on a regular basis, and routinely see remote places and see distant times. The most important CE5s that I've been part of over the years, and doing this with groups over the last, this is the 30th anniversary of the CE5 initiative. I started the project when I was 34, I'm 64 now. that those experiences, almost to specific information, was experienced in a meditative state or a lucid dream before it happened. For example, if you read the early accounts of us going to Mexico near the volcano, they call it Popo, it's Popocatépetl, something like that. I'm not very good with languages except Sanskrit. That whole experience, when you read about that in the books that we have, was seen exactly 7 days to the hour adjusted for time zones, 7 24-hour rotations of the Earth. And 7 days after I had that dream, we were at this very specific place that I was looking for. And we were there at the right place at the right time, and this enormous ship emerged from the volcano and came right over and signaled to us and all of that. So what I tell people is that you can use this, let's say you're planning to go out next weekend somewhere in your backyard or state park, just with your own housemates or something. You can actually intend, as you go to sleep at night or go into meditation, to ask, where should I be? Exactly what time might an event happen? What does the setting look like? Where is the moon in the sky? Whatever, all the granular detail you might, if you intend to ask for that, it'll be shown to you. And I think we're only limited by our own creativity. And I think Yogananda had a great saying that for the most part, humans are limited by their own lack of adventuresomeness. In other words, we don't believe we can do this because we're told we can't, which is as I said, a damnable lie. But on top of it, we have this tendency to limit our experimental adventuresomeness, where we never just sort of play with this and have fun with it. So I tell people that once you sort of realize that you can do this because it's your own innate ability, it doesn't, you don't have to be Ingo Swann or Russell Targ or anyone else like that to do this. Those people, if you get to know them well, as I did, I got to know Ingo Swann quite well, he would laugh and he would say, everyone can do this. It's just they don't believe they can. And since they believe they can't, they don't. It's a little bit like that old saying, as ye have faith, so shall your powers and blessings be. In other words, if you don't believe you can do something, you're not going to do it because you've already programmed yourself to fail. And I think we have to sort of think about how we were raised. I know I was raised in a very materialistic, atheist family, incredibly poor. I was starved as a child, beaten, neglected, had to put myself through high school, college, med school, had a very, very hard life. And we were all told, you can't do anything. And I had to sort of outgrow that, where I said, well, maybe I'm not as dumb as I was told, and I will do stuff. And I did. So you have to accept that. And there's no one who can do that for you. You have to say, okay, I'm an awake person. I can learn some meditation techniques. I'm not attached to what techniques you use, by the way. If it fires your rockets, go for it, honey. But the point is that you have to the very first thing is to say, wow, I really can do this. And then you start experimenting with it and you have fun with it. And that's sort of the very beginning of the adventure, let's call it. Because once you say you can do it and start playing with it, all kinds of magical things happen. I say magical only because they're relegated to magic and mysticism, because our civilization has become so materialistic that we've denied our true nature, which is as conscious, universal beings. But once we realize that each and one of us are, in fact, not only awake, but the faculty within us of being aware and conscious, we can become deeply conscious just of that field and become a seer of the future, a distant place, and an ambassador to these civilizations. Or you can engage in remote healing, where someone who is sick, you put your awareness on them and ask this great spirit, this unbounded field of consciousness that is at the root of our existence, to help that person. and if you think that won't happen, that your thought of it not happening will make it not happen. If you actually know it will and understand consciousness, as I'm trying to do in this sort of short YouTube video, then you realize it will work.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out the next one right here on the Best of Dr. Stephen Greer.